Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of How to Be Happy podcast. Today, my guest is Heidi. How are you doing today, Heidi?
I'm good, Brad. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm awesome every day, though. So, we're going to dive right in, okay? Tell us what stops people from creating a life that they absolutely love?
Easy. Basically, it's how you feel about yourself. That's what it all comes down to. So, most people have a feeling of low self-worth and a lot of resistance about their own selves. And that's pretty much it. That's the answer to that.
So, where does that come from, though? There's got to be where does it typically come from?
Yeah, it is not something that you can rationalize away or psychoanalyze. I've done all of that. I've figured out why I am the way I am, and that doesn't change anything. So these things are created a long time ago from your very first attachments, and they are nestled in your subconscious deeply. And they're built, it's the beliefs that you are built on, basically. That's what that stuff is.
And where do those beliefs typically come from? Because when we're born, we come out of the womb and it's just like, hey, look at me, I'm this amazing person. I don't have any anxiety, depression, OCD,
Yeah.
addiction issues. So
Yep.
where do these things come from?
So I'm not someone who just blames people for how I turned out. I have done a lot of work on forgiveness and empathy and all that stuff. So, and I think there's so many levels of mistreatment, right? So, and I don't classify, your trauma is worse than my trauma or stuff like that. But it's all the same. It's basically you're born, like you said, and you have needs. You are 100% dependent, and your caregivers meet your needs as the best that they can. And a lot of times those needs aren't met. And the biggest ones are the need for love and attention. I was fed, I was clothed, I was housed, but that is the one that in when those needs aren't met, as a child, you do whatever it takes to get those needs met. And so these patterns are created and these beliefs are created. Like mine was, I have to be happy to be loved. And if I'm sad, I have to keep it to myself and get over it as fast as possible. And there was a lot of shame with that feeling also. So fast forward into relationships, in your 40s and 50s. And if you haven't taken a good hard look at those patterns, those attachment patterns, those deep subconscious beliefs about yourself and in the world and your worth and your ability to be loved and be present and be authentic with yourself, you're going to find yourself in a lot of pain. So,
So you mentioned needs as a child, right?
mhm.
One of my most successful videos I actually just pushed out like 2 or 3 days ago. I do a daily video on happiness and peace and freedom, and it was basically quoting Gabor Mate, who's one of my mentors. He's been a physician. He specializes in addiction and trauma. He's amazing, right? So if you have issues with trauma, which most of us do, and we'll get into what trauma really means in a second here, uh, or you have issues with addiction, he's amazing. So basically, I just quoted him saying that pretty much every problem in your life can be traced back to unmet childhood needs. And I mean, everything from relationship problems to obesity to the divorce rate that we have, which is the first divorce rate's 50%, the third marriage divorce rate's like 72%. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Why you're irritated, why you have a bad relationship with your spouse or partner, it all goes back to unmet childhood needs, right?
Right.
Um, and some of the comments were, well, doesn't everyone have unmet childhood needs? And I think the answer is pretty much, yeah. Pretty much everyone has unmet childhood needs. It's just to what degree people do the work, to what degree do people have awareness that affects them, right? I mean, some people have unmet childhood needs and they lead an okay life, and others become, addicted to heroin or something.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, what you said, it's just having an awareness about it first. That's the first thing. And I didn't start figuring this stuff out until I was in my 40s.
Me
I
too.
just couldn't understand. Like, I consciously knew what I was doing to sabotage my relationships. I knew it. I just couldn't stop. And then there comes the compounded thing of then you beat yourself up because you're like, I should be doing better. I know better. Why do I keep doing the same stuff over and over? And it really is a process of digging to the root of it. You and I have talked about that a lot, and we agree on that wholeheartedly. You've got to figure out like what is that belief subconsciously, and one just hit me the other day. I was like, I'm 50 years old and I have these same patterns. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I had this belief that love was, I had to take what I could get, like it's not always there. And in that conversation with you, you said, really you just have to figure out that you don't need it from other people, that you have it in yourself. And of course, as kids, we don't know that. It's a matter of survival, getting that need met for love when we're little.
So you can tell me if this is correct or not. So you unconsciously from your past felt to some degree that you weren't lovable or you were unworthy and that you needed to grab love when it came along. Is that accurate? And so tell me, what did that mean in your life?
Oh God, pain. It meant a lot of pain. That's what it meant. It's a whole lot of things. It's not knowing what your gut is actually telling you. So there is a direct line between your intuition and your consciousness. Your intuition is very, very wise. It always tells you the right thing, but you might not be able to hear it. And then you might learn how to pay attention to your gut, to your intuition, but then you deny it because you talk yourself into something else. And for me, that meant really like not sticking to boundaries, like taking on things. I would see red flags and I would be like, make up in my mind how it could be better. And I would just keep doing it. It's like just, going backwards. It's trying to fix things and having this hope for something that's never going to happen. And it just results in a lot of heartache. Because eventually you do get to the point where you're like, wow, this is really not working. Nothing I've done is changing anything and making it what I really want. So you deny yourself and you take on a lot less and you put your energy in places that is kind of a waste.
So potential partners would come along. I'm just guessing here. And you had these internal gut feelings that you're like, something isn't right here, but your subconscious mind is kind of driving all the behavior, right? On a daily basis, it's probably 80 to 90% of our behavior is driven by our unconscious, subconscious thoughts that we don't even know.
Yep.
So unconsciously, you didn't wake up and say this, but unconsciously you're like, I'm not sure I'm lovable. So I got to grab him. He might not be perfect, but he might love me. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah. And even, it wasn't even that. I didn't think I wasn't lovable. I just felt like it's not going to come around again. I got to get it while it's here.
Consciously, you didn't think you were, but based on your past of what we talked about, just like mine, there was this unworthiness. This was like, I don't deserve this. So this guy might not be perfect, but he's here. I'm going to grab him.
And I can make this into what I want.
Yes.
That was the other thing.
Yes. So
and I believed that.
Yeah. So what we often do, I'm not saying you did this, but what we often do is we marry the people who created the trauma for us in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason we do that is kind of two reasons. One is because your subconscious mind, its only purpose is to keep you alive. It doesn't care if you're happy or sad. So it was like, okay, well, this person in their childhood they're still alive. So I'm going to recreate that same environment, right? The second is that we try to fix what didn't work before. If it's the mother or the father who didn't give us what we needed, we're going to find someone. Our subconscious mind, we're not going to go out and look for them. Our subconscious mind is going to go find the person that is just like them, thinking this time we can make it right.
Yes.
And that doesn't work. And I'm proof that doesn't work. So if you're in relationship after relationship and you're like, I keep finding these, I don't like this word, but it's a good descriptor. Like a lot of people use it, losers, because no one's a loser, but that's how people describe like failed relationships, right? I just keep meeting these losers. Well, you're doing it to yourself, your subconscious mind. And how do you change that? You become aware, right? Just what you've done. So talk us a little bit about how did you identify your pattern and then what did you do with it?
Yeah. So so things got really, really, really bad. And it's sort of like an addict hitting rock bottom. It was the same thing. So I got out of a 15-year marriage. And there was, alcoholism, and there was, verbal abuse, and the aftermath, the separation was so bad. It ended up going into court, for 4 years. And there was just so many, like, it was just the worst time of my whole life. And I went to the doctor just for a normal checkup, and they were like, you have PTSD. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I haven't been traumatized. I don't have trauma, like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But my doctor, who I trusted, she said, you should go see a trauma therapist. And so I've always talked to a counselor or a therapist, but I went for real this time, and I got EMDR, which is, trauma therapy. And
for those of you who don't know, can I just tell real quick? EMDR is well, you might be able to explain it better. Go ahead, because you've had it done. I've just
eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So it's based on the belief that trauma is stored in the body. And so you're sort of frozen off, it's separated out, and it gets triggered, and then it's so fresh. It's like it just happened because you haven't dealt with it, and it's not integrated into your system. So it's a way of integrating it. Basically, it uses eye movement. And in my case, it was tapping. So the therapist would tap left, right, left, right. This is why walking is so therapeutic, drumming, dancing, biking, because you're constantly stimulating left, right, left, right, left, right. And the reason that is a healing thing to do is because when you stimulate the left side of your body, the right side is activated. When you stimulate the right side of your body, the left side is activated. So in EMDR, a qualified therapist will take you to the source of it and walk you through it as they're doing this tapping, and make it very safe to unlock the frozen off space. And then when you can integrate this stuff, it's not so painful anymore. It's not so triggering anymore. It just softens it. And I learned this technique called restoring, where, you take, like, what did that mean about me when I fill in the blank, when I got separated, when I got cheated on, when I got hit, whatever it was. And you can shift that and change that, not telling yourself lies, but you're telling yourself the actual truth. You're seeing it in a truthful light. It just takes the sting away. And when people talk about, you have to heal your trauma. And by the way, I'm so tired of that. I'm like, everybody says that you need to work on yourself. You need to heal your trauma. It's like, how? Okay, I know. And what the hell? Like, how do I actually do this? And this is how you actually do it. And this is what I teach my clients. Like, I teach them how to talk to themselves. That's honestly what I do. It's like these feelings come up, they're automatic. What do you do with them? Well, I'm going to sit with this stuff that's so painful. I'd rather go run away. I'd rather deny it. I'd rather go do drugs. I'd rather go shopping. I'd rather have sex, rather than deal with this stuff. Well, yeah, deal with this stuff. Sit and deal with it. Let's talk about it. Teach how to nurture yourself, how to feel at home with all of the things that come up inside you. So I don't even remember what your original question was.
That was all great. There's so much great stuff here. So the truth shall set you free, right? That's on the screen right now.
Yeah.
Most humans' problems are self-inflicted, right? We self-inflict ourselves with these untrue thoughts. The untrue thoughts about, because of the trauma that we went through, or the stress. We'll get into that in a second. What really is trauma is we develop these coping mechanisms, these stories around the trauma. As Gabor says, the trauma isn't actually what happened to you. That's a traumatic event. The trauma happens when you actually tell yourself a story about that. So it sounds like we're both on the same page. The way that you get healthy, that you get free, is and break yourself out of this prison, this invisible prison, is to go back to your child, go back to the source of the pain, and retell that story, right?
Mm-hmm. And also learn how to comfort yourself. They call it self-soothing and all, or, healing the inner child and all that stuff. And I don't like any of those. The bottom line is, when these painful feelings come up, when you're thinking about things in your past, learn how to make yourself feel better. Because we also do this other thing where we compound the bad feeling. We have the bad feeling, and then we beat ourselves up for having the bad feeling. And there's a lot of shame attached to it. So it's a whole pile of pain. It's not even about the original pain. It's the stuff that we add on, and we don't know how to comfort ourselves. You know,
It's like this
people
vicious
want,
cycle.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
So that's really the bottom line is like, how do I work through this myself? How do I feel okay with my soul?
so you mentioned that's great. So you mentioned earlier not following your gut. And that is one of the things that is a huge byproduct of stress or childhood stress or trauma, right? So that's essentially what causes pain is getting disconnected from yourself. And who is
Mm.
yourself? Yourself is that baby that I talked about that came out of the womb, this happy, energetic, non-judgmental, no anxiety, no addictions, no depression. That's your true self. And what trauma does is it takes you away from that because you've got two primary needs as a young child. You need the attachment attached to your parent, or you're going to die in a matter of days. And you need the authenticity, which is like
Mhm.
feeling yourself, being yourself. And as soon as your parents can't, like most people can't deal with emotions, then you shut off your emotions because you're like, I need to keep alive. So really, the gut thing is so huge. You have got to, if you want to just make one change from this podcast today, your gut is so intuitive and so, like you said, it's never wrong. Just follow your gut all the time. If something feels wrong, act on it.
That sounds really easy, Brad. But it's not. Yeah, the solution is very simple, actually. There's so many reasons why we don't do that. And it does come down to that survival thing. It's like it's too scary. So what I do with clients is we figure out like what is the thing, right? What is the resistance? What are you holding on to? And then once it's conscious, once you figured it out, it's like, okay, now you know this. Why don't you just let it go? Why don't you just listen to your gut? Why don't you just be your authentic self? Well, it's scary because it traces back to that survival thing. So then it's a matter of what am I so afraid of that I'm holding on to this thing that is not true and not good for me? And then what would it take to let this thing go? So, and I feel like there's a lot of coaching out there and counseling that bypasses that part. It's like, okay, let's figure out what the thing is, you know, okay, great. Okay, now you figured it out. Let it go. Let's move on. It's not, you've got to work through it. Like there's a lot of reasons why people protect themselves with their dysfunctions and their coping skills. It's safer to be stuck. And it's scary. The real people say, oh, I just want to be free. You know, I just want to be happy. No, you don't. Like that is frightening to you,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yeah. You must move through the pain to get to the freedom, right? That's the banner right now that's up. Um, there's a great saying, pain moves through families until someone's ready to feel it. So we're stuck in
ooh,
this
that one.
multi-generational curse, right? We use the word blame at the beginning. This is nothing. This is I don't ever blame anyone, right? The stuff that my parents did, their parents, like, it's just, no one wakes up and says, hey, I'm going to mess up my child.
Oh,
It,
yeah. They
it,
try not to.
it's all intentional, but you can, I mean, this is a new year, right? If you're in a bad situation, you can continue in that bad situation, or you can look up and say, you know what, I'm finally ready to deal with it. And it doesn't have to be months and years of treatment, right? It can be in a matter of, like I've seen, and I know you've seen, in a matter of hours, like this radical transformation in people by going back to the pain, talking about it, figuring out what stories you told yourself, and then reversing those stories. Like, tell yourself a better lie, as Marissa Peer's book says, tell yourself a better lie.
Yeah, well, it's actually the truth. This is what I've discovered is that you are telling yourself lies, but you've gotten so used to them, they feel comfortable. They're familiar. My little prison and my little, you know, sitting in my dirty diaper, I'm used to it. So this is where I'm going to go, you know, because it's safe. And like you keep saying, you know, safe, alive is not necessarily happy or
Yeah.
quality of life, right? Yeah, so you go there and it's not so terrible. Like pain doesn't kill us.
No.
You know, we're built to be, you know, resilient. We can do this. We can do this work. And once we're not so afraid of feeling that feeling, it's like, okay, I'm gonna just go through the storm. I'm gonna handle this stuff. I'm gonna let it all in. I'm gonna feel it. I'm gonna be kind to myself. I'm gonna be nurturing with it. I'm going to ask myself some questions. I'm going to be honest with myself. And then you come up with the truth, which is the best part, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. And You mentioned earlier PTSD. You went to your normal primary care physician, and they looked at you and talked to you and diagnosed you with PTSD.
Yeah, it was I guess she was in the same clinic as my PCP. She was actually, it was my gynecological exam. Okay. It was her. It was that one, but she's part of the whole, they all the doctors work together, but it was her who said it. So I went to her for my physical annual, and they always ask, because they're kind of a holistic based practice, but
Okay.
she said, how are you in life, emotionally? And what I said, not good. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I'm scared all the time. I did. I had things, I was being threatened for blackmail. I was being followed. Like, it wasn't in my imagination, everything I did and said was held up against me in a court of law. Like, it was really, and she said, I think you have post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think you need trauma therapy. And I'm like, yeah, if she hadn't said that to me, I would have not done EMDR.
So, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but how unusual that is. I guess it's part of the holistic process or the practice. Now it makes a little bit more sense, but most doctors aren't trained in this stuff. And Gabor Mate, again, one of my mentors, has this, just came out with a 600-page book called The Myth of Normal. And the whole book is about how these unmet childhood needs and these emotional problems create all of the sickness in our lives, from cancer to MS to eczema to irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I find when I say this, I get a lot of pushback, but it's science, right? MD Anderson Cancer Research, they're one of the top cancer research in the world. They're University of Texas in Austin. It says it right on their website, like, stress fuels cancer. So most doctors, you go in to get diagnosed with something. This is what Western medicine does. They diagnose you, they label you, and they give you drugs. That's pretty much what Western medicine is. And drugs don't typically solve the problem. They can, but for a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, they're really just a Band-Aid. I think in Tony Robbins' book, he talks about how Paxil has 50% success rate, which is exactly like a placebo. It's just getting your mind to believe that you can change is better than the drug. So you were really fortunate. And it's a shame that more doctors, and they're not trained in this. It's not like they're doing this on purpose. Most doctors aren't trained in this.
No.
How many doctors have you gone to other than this doctor in your life where you walked in and they're like, how are you mentally? What are your feelings? What was your childhood like? Never, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah, yeah, not at all. Do you know about Joe Dispenza?
I do.
Yeah. So he had a broken back, was never going to walk again. And he decided, well, I'm laying here in this bed forever. I'm going to just start doing this visualization stuff and getting my back to heal. And he did it. And he walks, and, so I know. And also, so my background is in fitness, and, it started out like, I'm going to help people with their diet and with their exercise, and I'm going to get people healthy. And I did that. I've been doing it for 27 years. And then, like I told you, I would get to a point where it would plateau, or it would even regress, and they would go backwards. There's just no more progress. And I finally realized, like, it's not enough to just, start exercising and eating healthy. Like, if you don't clean out that stuff emotionally, it's going to show up in the body. And like we've talked about, the whole weight loss thing, it is so much deeper than just diet and exercise.
It is so much deeper. I think, like, that's why 98% of the diet industry just, failure. And how many of you have gained weight and lost weight over and over again? The ACE study, adverse childhood experiences, you can go Google it, you can take it. It's on a scale of 1 to 10. And it tells you just how much childhood trauma you had. And they have incredible statistics about the higher your score, the more drug addiction, the more depression, the more cancer, the more heart attacks. So it's science. It's not just me saying this.
Yeah.
And if I'd have heard this 3 years ago, I'd have been like, this is crazy. This is nonsense. There's no way that stress can create all that. But it does. So why was the ACE study, and you should go Google it, ACE study, and score yourself. Why was the ACE study started? It was a doctor, a weight loss doctor in California, that had all of these people, women who were losing weight, and then 50% of them were dropping out. And he created the study for that. And the reason is because it's not a physical, it's a mental thing, right? A lot of these ladies, if I remember correctly, they would lose weight and they had been sexually molested as a child, and their heaviness kept them, they thought,
Safe.
kept them safe and kept the predators away. Or in a lot of instances, kids that are abused are little, and they're what they say is, I wish I were bigger. I wish I could protect my mom from my dad if I were only bigger. And guess what? Your body gives you exactly what your mind says. So the pictures and the things and the words that you put in your head, you're going to get from your body. So if you tell yourself you want to get bigger as a child, it's buried in your subconscious mind. So yeah, think about all the billions of dollars that are spent on diet and gym memberships and weight loss drugs, everything. And most of it doesn't work. So
yeah,
that's why you have success, I'm assuming, with your clients now.
Right. And also, not only is it a protection thing, like I need to keep myself safe because of whatever, I'm going to get to this point so I can keep myself safe. There's another piece of the puzzle, and that has to do with how you identify yourself. So for instance, the client that we talked about was someone who, when she was struggling with her weight and always has her whole life, her parents called her chunky. That was how everybody thought of her. I'm a chunky kid. I'm a chunky person. I am chunky. Be careful when you say statements, I am, because you will fight really hard to stay aligned with who you believe you are. So the idea of changing your identity, which for these people, they're chunky, you want to lose weight, you're going to lose yourself. It's like death. It's like the fear of not being who you are is like the fear of losing your life. That's how strong of a bond that is. So that's another reason why people have a lot of trouble changing their physical bodies, because a lot of their identity is wrapped up in that.
Yeah. So stop telling, again, it's the words and pictures we put in our head, right? So I train my clients when they have any negative emotion, actually welcome it, because it's your body's alarm system saying something isn't right. So when you feel that negative emotion, you pause, you identify the emotion, and you identify the emotion by saying, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, not I am. Because as you said, when you identify with I am sad or I am depressed or I am angry, that's a lasting thing. When you say I'm feeling, feelings come and go. So you feel it, you identify it, you give yourself compassion for it. Instead of beating yourself, you give yourself compassion no matter what it is. And then you figure out, where did it come from? And the next step would be, is if you have a partner who wants to do the work with you, have a conversation with him or her about, hey, what you just said invoked this feeling in me. Can we talk about it? And I actually created a tracker to do this. And at the top, it explains all that in great detail. There's actually neuroscience around it. If you go to bradchandler.com/tracker, you can download it for free. But there's neuroscience around the fact that we spend so much of our time in a triggered state. And we spend time in a triggered state because, again, that's trauma taking us out of the present. And when we're in a triggered state, we cannot focus, we cannot have creativity. So all of the work that we're talking about, it doesn't just help one area of your life, it literally helps everything, right?
I really like that process that you just described that's on the tracker, because one of the other things that bothers me about all the self-help stuff that's out there, it's like, and this is in a lot of the groups I'm in, they're like, you need to work on yourself before you can have healthy relationships. You have to work on yourself. You have to work on yourself. You have to be okay with yourself. Well, then, okay, so let's say I do all this work on myself and then I go be in a relationship and everything just goes to crap. It's like, I liked what you said about like, figure this stuff out in your own self, do this little back and forth with yourself. And then if you are in relationship, practice having those conversations with the person. Working on yourself is a piece of what makes a healthy relationship, but ultimately we need to learn how to communicate in relationships about this stuff so the relationship can grow.
It is a little bit difficult if you've got a partner that doesn't want to do the growth. So this would be a great opportunity to see it. And once it happens in an intimate relationship where you guys are actually working in the same direction to heal these pains. And by the way, an intimate relationship is the absolute best place in the world to do that, because that's where most of this stuff shows up.
Yep.
You're going to become closer. So after you do this work, like instead of it turning into a huge argument, which is what used to happen in my relationships, and I'm sure in yours too, conflict now I welcome, because it's an opportunity to heal something within myself, but then also become closer to my partner. It's a beautiful thing.
I totally agree with you.
And in screaming and shouting and me, being cold to her for the next 3 days, like it was with my, ex-wives. It's, hey, this is the time to heal. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I made a rule for myself a few years ago that I wasn't going to fight with people ever. I'm not ever going to engage in a back and forth. What happens is, you say something to someone, I feel whatever, if you're communicating in the best possible way, which is not, you did this to me, I blame you for blah, 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 none of that stuff. But if you sit with it yourself and you figure out how to communicate, you say to them, I feel whatever, and the other person gets immediately defensive. It becomes basically what they're hearing is, you did this to me, you're wrong, you hurt me. And so all they can do in response is get defensive, deny your feelings, and attack back. And then here you are. I mean, it's just going to go nowhere. So learning how to be receptive when your person says, I'm feeling this or that, to just let that sit there, like legit, not to take it as an attack on you. You don't have to be right. And it's okay, because guess what? People don't mean to hurt other people all the time. I mean, sometimes people do, but I think most of the time it's just chemistry. I am how I am. This person is how this person, there's some collateral pain that happens sometimes. It's nobody's fault.
Right.
This stuff just happens. We can avoid it. We can try to avoid it as best we can, but we're going to hurt the people that we love, even in our absolute best intentions. But what if you could sit down and have a conversation? I'm feeling this pain. I hear you. That makes sense. I see it how you saw it.
Let's work through it.
Cool. The end.
So Heidi, how does someone get in contact with you?
So my website is HeidiShaner.com, and my email is HeidiShaner@gmail.com. So
awesome. So another awesome show. Hopefully you liked it. If you did like it, please subscribe, share, like us, whatever the newest thing is, and you'll get more of these episodes. And if you need to reach me, I'm at bradchandler.com. And if you want to see all of my daily posts, because I put out a video, all of my social media can be found at bradchandler.com/contact. And remember, love heals all.
Thank you.